To this month's meeting of the Transportation Licensing Commission. Our regular chair, Brian Winfrey, could not be with us today, so as vice chair, I'm going to chair the meeting. My name is Sal Hernandez. Welcome. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that if you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission's decision. We advise that you seek your own independent legal advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. Fellow commissioners, Mr. Fields has circulated last month's meeting minutes. Is there a motion regarding those minutes?
Move to approve them.
Second.
Motion to approve minutes and second has been proposed. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes have been approved. Today on our agenda, we've got two public hearings. Our first hearing is for consideration of a Transportation Licensing Commission rule that would require uninsured motorist coverage from a Tennessee licensed insurer with at least an AM Best rating of B+ or higher for permitted taxicabs. We've got two requests to speak on the issue from the public, and I would ask that those requesting to speak keep your comments brief. Mr. Nathan Spears. Thank you.
Commissioners, we kind of touched on this last month, and I can't remember the gentleman's name from the commission. I'm Nathan Spears, by the way, Genie Insurance Agency, for the record. And he suggested that people would have coverage for uninsured motorists under their personal auto policies, even while occupying a vehicle they do not own. I was unaware of that, but as it turns out, that is the case. So there is some additional coverage there. If the limits that we're suggesting were somehow exhausted, their uninsured motorist would kick in above and beyond that, up to the limits of their personal auto policy, even if it's their children, residents of their home, etc. There's currently no law that absolutely requires taxi cabs, or anyone for that matter, to carry uninsured motorists. So it's a step in the right direction. Personally, I don't insure anyone without it. I have in the past, maybe 2 times, when I was more of a novice, and we don't do that any longer. I feel like it's irresponsible. However, at the same time, in reality, the very nature of that coverage is a loss leader for insurance companies. They're very conservative about what limits they offer with taxi. I feel like it's unrealistic to require limits that would be in excess of what we're suggesting today, or what you guys are suggesting, rather. So at any rate, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Just so I'm clear, I know that with a lot of policies, my personal policy, I didn't have uninsured motorists until I asked for it. So I'm sure that there's a lot of people that do not have it. But you're saying that the taxi insurance policies for the taxi drivers that you issue, most of them, except for 2, had uninsured motorist coverage, is that correct?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah, at the limits that we've suggested.
Okay.
And, it's also a matter of protecting the drivers as well. If they're hit by an uninsured motorist or hit and run situation, there'd be some coverage there for them for bodily injury.
Any other questions for Mr. Spears?
Mr. Spears, you got any idea what accidents that occur, how much the damages are? 'Cause
Well, it
my
varies.
biggest concern is that we make sure we cover people who are riding in taxis.
Sure.
And I don't like the idea of saying, well, as a passenger, I'm going to subsidize the insurance with my insurance, an accident may have been caused by someone else who hit a taxi cab. Does that
Sure.
make sense what I'm saying?
It's a valid argument, and I could make the argument as well very easily. But in reality, if you require a higher UM limit, you're going to narrow the market down as far as insurers who are willing to do it. And just because you have one market that will readily do that and they'll say, oh, we'll write up to 100,000, that's fine. That's one market. Insurance companies come and go. So I don't know how sustainable that would be. And also the counter argument to that is, why is it the taxi operator's responsibility to insure the world? There's some personal responsibility that we have to take. And that would be in the form of your own personal auto insurance that would accommodate you in a situation like that, or perhaps health insurance.
Well, if you invite me into a cab, I'm not expecting to have to insure my safety inside a cab that someone's offering to me.
Okay, fair enough.
I expect that they'll have the coverage. But
Yeah.
to going back to my first question, any idea what damages run in Nashville?
In general or specifically for uninsured motorists? Or
No, in general.
Just in general? Well, to put it into perspective, we had the lower limits of 25, 50, and 15 for many years now. I went back and looked at a 10-year loss history with my primary carrier, and we maxed out maybe 3 to 4 claims in 10 years, which is kind of surprising. And we're thankful for that. But at any rate, the liability side has not been a particular problem.
So the risk is below this, you think?
Well, anything can happen. But statistically speaking, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Refresh my memory, what UM level were we speaking of? What's the dollar amount?
$25,000 for bodily injury per person, $50,000 for bodily injury to 2 or more people.
Okay.
Thanks.
And we don't require this of anything else that we regulate currently, by the way. So, all right, thank you.
And Mr. Fields, before we call the next person, presently right now, there are no requirements for UM coverage?
Correct.
Mr. Bruce Giles? Hello.
Good afternoon. I'm Vice President of Product Development and Underwriting for Atlas Financial. We do business in your state under American Service Insurance Company. We currently write about 183 policies in the state of Tennessee on taxi cabs. In particular, Checker Cab here locally, we insure a number of their cabs, which was much higher limits, $300,000 on the liability, and they are also already purchasing 60,000 uninsured, underinsured motorists from us. We have no problem insuring people up even whatever limit of liability they want to purchase for uninsured motorists. Although across the country, and we insure thousands of cabs across the country, in most cases it is voluntary for people to purchase uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage on those cabs. But we have no problem in providing the coverage for them. There's one other thing I just wanted to mention while I was up here, and if I could ask you to reopen it. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend last month. We are a B-rated carrier by AM Best. company. I know you discussed last month about a B+ rating. I asked Mr. Fields to hand out some material in regard to admitted versus non-admitted carriers, and the fact that an admitted carrier, which we are, we pay taxes into the state insurance department to be a part of the plan and to be an admitted carrier. In the event of an insolvency, as an admitted carrier, the plan would step in and provide coverage. Not that that's going to happen to us. We're very solid financially, but I did want to ask if you could reopen that. And also, I wanted to field any questions you might have in regard to uninsured, underinsured motorists, because again, we insure thousands of cabs across this country.
I believe we had a long discussion, or a lot of discussion on the A+, or was it B+ and B, and we were considering going B+. What's the difference between B+ and B? AM Best has some, well, there's a number of things that they look at. One of which is some financial formulas, what they call a B-car score. Now, our particular companies, if you just looked at their B-car score, we would actually be A-rated. However, they take other things into consideration. 2 years ago, Atlas Financial purchased some companies from the Kingsway Financial Group. Kingsway had some financial difficulties, which caused surplus depletion in the underlying companies. Since we bought those, we have several quarters of profitability. We're on the road, hopefully, to an increased AM Best rating. But AM Best, just because you meet their B-car score, they don't automatically increase it. To give a little perspective on AM Best and some of their ratings, AIG and Hartford, everybody's familiar with what happened to them, right? What do you think their AM Best rating was? It was an A. However, if the federal government hadn't stepped in and provided them with bailouts, they would have been bankrupt. However, their policyholders still would have been covered in your state because they write on an admitted basis in your state insurance plan, which has a fund for that, would have stepped in to provide coverage. You mentioned that most of the policies, or all the policies that you have with checker cabs, have the UM endorsement at $60,000, is that correct?
Yes, because the limit of liability they chose was $300,000, which is a combined single limit, meaning it could be used for any one individual or multiple individuals, or even property damage on the policy. So their uninsured motorist level that they purchased was also a single limit of $60,000.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, you said you insure cabs all across the country.
All across the country.
Towns that are comparable to Nashville, what's the uninsured motorist coverage? Average, typical.
You know, it's really all over the board. You know, there's many of them that only require, you know, minimum limits of liability. In some cases, as low as 15, 30, which is, you know, pretty low. I would say inadequate. In New Orleans, the limits of liability required are 25, 50, and so are the uninsured motorist. It has to be the same minimum limit of 25, 50.
What about the rating? Typical.
In most municipalities, they're silent on the AM Best rating. There's a few that have requirements. And some of them do make a difference between a non-admitted and an admitted carrier, because, and I asked Billy here to hand out some handouts for you that kind of describes the difference in the fact that an admitted carrier is part of the plan. There are many of them that do have AM Best ratings if the carrier is a non-admitted carrier. Oftentimes that's A- or A.
And what you're saying then is that an admitted carrier in Tennessee would be covered under the state's basically supplemental insurance policy if the carrier...
Yeah, all admitted carriers pay a tax, and that money goes to fund a plan that steps in case of the insolvency of an admitted carrier.
So you're basically effectively doing an insurance policy with the state if you're an admitted carrier.
Effectively, yes. That is actually a good way to look at it. As an admitted carrier, you're required to take out the policy,
Yeah.
but yes, exactly.
Okay.
Does that admitted carrier have any correlation with AM Best at all?
No.
Okay.
No, it's just a matter of having filed the paper, getting the proper certificate of authority, and being considered an admitted carrier within the state.
And then, right now, you couldn't do business in Nashville because you don't have the B+.
We would have to stop doing business based on last month's meeting.
Even though you're an admitted carrier.
Yes.
And insured by the state.
Correct. And we could do business anywhere else in the state, but not in Nashville.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, and I have to go by memory because I don't have my handouts from last month, there was a lot of discussion about that. At first, we even had a motion to only approve A rating and then revise that to B+ rating. And I don't have those descriptions right here in front of me like I had last month. So I think that if it is even a consideration, we would have to table it until we have all of that information back again and we're able to review it.
If you choose to revisit that, what we would need to do is ask for a public
hearing. We'd have to do it in another public hearing. We could do that in May. And basically what would happen is that part of you would just go back and revisit that particular part of the rule. And certainly we can do that if you want to reopen the subject.
I agree, Mr. Fields. Mr. Giles, it is procedurally, it would be improper for us to even attempt to change the rule.
I understand.
But we certainly can, reconsider our prior decision last month to require a minimum AM Best rating of B+. It may, and it would obviously give the public an opportunity to fully address it.
Sure.
To allow the commission to get more information as well.
Yeah, I would be glad to come back next month if you would revisit it.
But we do have the hearing that's before us right now, which is the uninsured motorist insurance coverage. Thank you, Mr. Giles.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on this issue? With that, at this time, I close the public hearing portion for consideration of this rule, and now we'll open for deliberation. Are there any commissioners that would like to speak on the issue? Particularly the issue of level of coverage?
Well, based on new knowledge, we don't have wording that states admitted or non-admitted. I think that would be prudent to add into the rule. That would add in an extra layer of security.
So you're suggesting that any rule we require, the commission require for uninsured motorists coverage, that in addition to an AM Best rating minimum, there should be a admitted versus non-admitted clarification?
That's correct.
Or we could have an either or. If we felt that B+ was appropriate with additional information about the admitted or non-admitted. If you didn't have a B+, but you were an admitted carrier and then covered by the state of Tennessee, that seems like it would be
Okay to be B?
okay, yeah.
Well, I guess we forgot to ask one question. Would they 100% be covered under the state insurance plan? Or is it up to a certain level?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm seeing heads nod.
there are certainly state-specified limits per claim, and they're not very large, but they do provide some coverage. That's probably another reason why, having that issue on next month's agenda might be beneficial.
Sounds good.
Any other considerations before we take a vote on what to do with respect to this proposal?
Yeah, I was looking back at that report that the city had done, a report on taxi cab other passenger vehicles for hire in Nashville. And I was trying to find if there was any recommendation in there regarding uninsured motorists. They did have a recommendation about increasing liability insurance, which we've taken action on. Does any commissioners remember if there was anything in the report? I don't find it in here about uninsured motorists.
I believe he stated that a lot of people, the public, would have uninsured motorist coverage in their policies. I believe that was his stance on it. And I may be wrong.
No, I think he means BC Cop.
But there are probably a lot of people that are taking cabs that, citizens in Nashville that maybe
Right.
don't have cars and wouldn't have
The uninsured motorist
uninsured
coverage.
carriage. coverage.
Right. Because I'm serving as the chair, I don't have a vote on this issue, but certainly I think it's very important for our cabs to have coverage of some level.
Right.
That amount I'm not really sure of. And certainly the consideration of the AM Best rating and whether or not the insurance company for the cab is admitted or non-admitted, we probably do need more information on.
I'll take a shot at a motion if it's, I move we adopt a rule requiring uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage in the amounts of 25, 50, and 15 with a carrier holding a rating of not less than B+ or be an admitted carrier in the state of Tennessee.
Are we allowed any discussion before we have to vote?
No, we have a motion on the table. Any seconds? If there are no seconds, then the motion would not survive, and we could continue discussion.
You can discuss after a second, too.
Okay.
Hearing no second, the motion dies. Any further discussion?
The only concern I have about the previous motion was saying that either B+ or admitted. I would want to see a floor, I guess is what I'm looking for, is no lower than, say, a B and admitted. Does that make? Because I don't want to see some D, C, or, God forbid, F probably come in here just because they're admitted.
And just to clarify, the 25, 50, 15, what is the 15 referring to?
Probably.
So it's 25 for one,
50 for
two or more, and 15's for the property.
So you're gonna keep those same limits as your liability are currently.
I don't remember what the difference was between the B+ and the B.
I think it was quite negligible from my recollection.
Was it?
It's
A- minus and B+ is what was discussed.
I'm sorry, could you, if you can answer my question.
If you'll introduce yourself.
Dave McIndoe, Greater Nashville Insurance. The difference between the AM Best, Metro requires everything to be no less than A-. Anything doing anything with Metro government or the city of Metro. Just like anything else, it's based on the balance sheet. It's based on reserves for payment of claims. AM Best doesn't like fee-rated companies. You could have a non-operating profit of losses due to claims, but if you charge a $12 payment fee, at the end of the day, your balance sheet shows the policy that you made money. AM Best doesn't like that because it's not the way of doing practices. So the higher rated companies are getting rewarded for what they have accomplished themselves, just like if you've accomplished something in life, you've accomplished because of a lot of hard work, even you made sacrifices and set things aside. So between A- and B is a huge difference. Between B+ and B++, not as much. But that's AM Best been doing it for over 100 years. So that's what they're doing. Now the specific, you're asking for, I don't know the specific
Yeah, the
detail, but it's basically balance sheet and how they make the profit. Is a profit not fee-based, and it's actually underwriting profit. They like that versus the fee. And then they do take into consideration if you buy another company and stuff. But at the same time, when you're buying companies, you know you're going to get rated. That's part of life too. So it is what it is. The UM that's on the board now, I think the limits that were last month was 50, 150. So by what he's making right now, he's reducing the UM off of the proposal of last month.
I would really like to revisit and take a look at all of the information that we brought with us to the meeting last month, because I remember that we talked about the A- or the A versus the B+, and we went with B+. But before we reduce it to B- or B, I'd like to take a look at that description again, and I just don't have that paperwork
Right,
here with
and
me.
that piece of paperwork, A++ through B++ is one heading. And then from B plus down to C is another heading. That's what was that's why it was stopped at the B plus plus. And then when you open up the next, below the next line, that's lowering the level of, not quality of insurance, I don't mean like that, but the profitability of the insurance company and the insurance reserves. And if a company was to fail, who's going to be there to pick that company up?
Mr. Fields, if I could make a recommendation and get some clarification from you, I would think that we as the commission could defer a decision on this issue to next month so we can get more information. I think it might be helpful to have maybe Mr. B.C. Cobb, if he's available, to come back before us. He can answer questions directly himself about the what the state offers in terms of a backup plan if the insurance company fails as an entity with its insureds. I think that would be very helpful information for us to learn more about.
If you would defer, and that's what I was going to actually suggest, we defer the action and then would also give an opportunity to do a public notice on the issue that you dealt with the last month. It doesn't sound like the liability levels were a problem in terms of the 50, 150 that would go into effect later, but the issue of the rating would be. So what we could do is reopen that particular have a public hearing, and I'd work with Metro Legal to make sure we notice it properly so you could deal with everything on the liability insurance as well as uninsured motorist insurance. And I think we could probably put together a notice to do that. Sure. Right. And then that way it'll all be on the table at one time where you can take action or not.
Commissioners, any further considerations on the issue? And the chair would entertain a motion.
Move deferral.
Second?
Aye.
Motion to defer today's issue regarding uninsured motorists and also to consider the AM Best rating for liability insurance limits. And that'll get deferred. Motion passes. Next, we have another public hearing regarding the consideration of a Transportation Licensing Commission rule which requires GPS tracking for all permitted taxi cabs along with provisions for establishing minimum equipment standards and capabilities, usage during operational period, as well as reporting requirements and implementation requirements. I have two notices here of requests to speak. Miss Amanda Valentine.
Good afternoon. I've been asked to speak on behalf of Livia Smith's friends and family, who have given me some guidance on what to relay to the commission. Some of her friends are here as well today. I'm sure you're aware of Livia's story, but I want to remind you of some of the events of February 20th, 2013, just over 2 months ago. That night, Livia was having drinks with friends. She was ready to go home, and rather than driving, she made a safe and responsible choice to get into a taxi cab. Her friend walked her to that taxi cab and was the last person we know who saw her alive, but her friend was not the last person to see her alive. The last person to see her alive was the taxi driver who took her home. She was found dead in the middle of the road the next morning. That is the extent of what we know, and that is truly tragic. Although we will never give up hope, we are beginning to accept that we will likely never know what happened to Livia, and there will be no justice. Livia was a beautiful person. She was a daughter, a sister, a best friend, a new homeowner, a professional esthetician, and a dog owner. She was only 32. Her birthday is actually 5 days from now, and she will never turn 33. Livia's mother, Rachel Black, wrote to me in preparation for this statement and said, "When my son and I made the sorrowful trip here to bring Livia home, I was appalled to learn that taxi cabs in Nashville did not keep proper records and that, because of this, the police had almost no information to help their investigation. What you are voting for today is a remedy to that problem. Although we wish it would have come sooner, we ask that you pass a GPS mandate for taxi cabs so that Livia's death will not be in vain and so that future responsible adults will feel confident riding in a taxi cab again and will be secure in that ride. Even if the installation of a GPS in the taxi cab that took Livia on her last ride would not have prevented her death, it would have certainly given the police enough leads to determine the cause of her death and to bring the responsible party to justice, and to give all of us a sense of closure. Safe commuting is a good decision. With our city getting bigger and bigger by the day and summer approaching, we need our natives and our tourists to know that they can travel safely in our pay-for-transit system. The technology in question here, GPS, is already readily available and relatively inexpensive. Smartphones include GPS. UPS, FedEx, landscaping companies, construction companies, and trucking companies employ GPS in their day-to-day operations. We further suggest that in respect to a growing and prospering Nashville, regulations surrounding taxi cabs should more closely emulate bigger cities such as Chicago and New Orleans, which already have established a GPS requirement. Stricter enforcement of existing and new passenger safety regulations, coupled with heightened accountability of enforcement responsibilities, is also vital in ensuring transportation safety for our citizens. An ordinance is only as strong as its enforcement. We humbly ask you to honor Livia by voting to require GPS tracking in all taxi cabs so that another person's loved ones, in the horrible event that something like this happened again, would have the closure that we probably never will. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valentine. I have another request to speak from, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Johnny Wild?
Sorry.
White.
I was in a hurry. It's kind of easy. I just want, we've been in process of putting our GPS system in for quite some time. It takes a while. Johnny White, Music City Taxi. I'm just coming in a cold. But GPS could just be how we word that could just be given directions. So it needs to be a tracking system, not just GPS. And because like I say, GPS can be in your phone. It needs to be where it stays in the vehicle. The drivers maintain that in the vehicles, not unplug them. I mean, we've had these issues. So I really hope that we can not just. In the past, there was a company that was mandated, Billy, you remember, and Lisa can, and it never happened. They got permits based on it. It never, to this day, it's never happened. And I just hope that there's some bite behind this, because it does need to happen. We need to be able to track. We need to, for safety of the drivers and the customers. There are many incidents that have happened over the last couple of years that could have been prevented, not with just GPS, but with proper management in the companies. And this could have been, this event could have been taken care of if the company that was in, the company would have been held responsible. So,
I have one question.
Yes.
What's your cost to put GPS in the cab?
It's gotten a lot cheaper. That has. The cost of the unit is almost free. It's the monthly charge per vehicle that you're talking about. You're talking about several thousand dollars per month for the GPS tracking system.
No, how much per car though?
Per car, right now per car it's probably somewhere around the $50 per vehicle per unit in the vehicle right now.
Per month?
Excuse
Per
me?
month?
Per month, per vehicle, for a charge fee. That's not counting the expense of the equipment, and then you have some additional fees. That's the wireless fee, and then you have if you have someone that's we use a company out of Florida. They maintain for the program. Then you have to have computers, each computer, and you have to train people. So it takes a while. It just doesn't you don't just plug this in. You have to train everybody. Everybody's used to doing things a certain way. And it goes down, and sometimes, I mean, computer systems go down, everybody knows, and you have to still be able to fall back on the old system, and it will happen. I mean, you have computerized, you have internet-based issues, you have power issues, so.
Are there other less expensive options?
That's about the one we're using, I think, is probably about the cheapest service out there. You can get the tablets. They're almost giving, just like a phone, they'll give you the tablets. The problem with the tablet is when people see it, and I'll speak for Allied, they see the tablet in there. They see the tablet in the vehicle. They break the window out. They steal the tablet and the bracket. The locking bracket costs more than the tablet does to secure it in there. So people take that out, and You can't put it in the back, obviously, people destroy them. So it's really new to us. They've changed their Allied, is it not, y'all changed your system. It's the same tablet that we use. Is that correct, Brandon? You think it's probably the cheapest system as far as to get up and running and going. Another thing is, like I say, we've had an issue, and I think Checker Cab, I don't know if someone's here from Checker Cab. You have to watch the drivers. They try to find ways to unplug it and say there's a power problem. Of course, you can discipline that, but you have, and it still doesn't keep someone from what we have all, and for 100 years, it's been called high flagging. Meters, the old meters, the meter used to have a flag on it, it went up. Well, if you didn't have that meter, if the meter was up, it let someone know that flag was up. It was a red or a yellow flag. It let them know that person had their meter running and they were operating. So if they don't push the buttons, you don't know if they're actually operating. So we may need to install or go back to instituting where the top light is on with the meter. We can do that. It won't take a lot to do that. The meters come pre-made that way. It'll take a little while to get that, but that way you know when they can't operate the vehicle. If you see them running down with customers in the vehicle, the light's not on, the meter's not on, they're high flagging. They're running without turning their GPS unit on, their meter on.
Will that meter connected to the top light connect to the GPS and the monitoring service?
It will. Okay. It will. That's the way Brandy and them, their Checker Cab has really got theirs operating very efficient. It needs to be. It needs to be. It's been needed for a long time. There were a couple of rapes that happened at Vanderbilt. A couple of students got raped over there a couple of times. It could have been this kind of stuff. It won't solve all the problems, but it'll solve some. Even cab driver murders. It'll get those people off the road. It'll resolve the issues.
I'd like to hear from Ms. Brandy after you're done about your system and how well it's been working and the tracking capabilities.
We use the mobile knowledge system. I'm Brandy Dismaying, the manager of the Checker Cab Company. We have the 2008 mobile knowledge system. And ours works. I mean, we paid a lot of money up front to install the system in the cars. There's a monthly maintenance fee that we pay of about $550 a month for a fleet of 105 cars. So, I mean, it's not really that much. The upfront cost was, upwards. It was a lot of money to put it in. But what Johnny was pointing out, there are always ways for drivers to find out a way to disconnect the GPS. My issue with Checker Cab, I mean, we have discipline. We fire drivers if I catch them without their GPS on the street. But what would help, I believe, if you're going to enforce this GPS system in the cabs, which I'm all for, I like it. I like to be able to track the drivers, and I've even helped the police with things when they've called and asked me, about certain cases. But what I would like to see, if you're going to enforce it in the cabs, is to make sure that each driver is held responsible, that action is taken from the commission if they're caught messing with the GPS, disabling it, that something comes here from you guys so that there is something that will give them more of an incentive not to mess with it. Because I tell them all the time, it's not just for the customer's protection, it's your protection. In an accident, anything goes on, I know exactly where you are right then. I can send somebody to you right away. So, I mean, if you're going to make the drivers, everybody put it in the cabs, let there be some kind of a consequence if they're caught in violation of messing with the GPS and turning them off while they're in service. But our system works. I mean, we like it. The drivers like it. They feel secure with it.
Is there some kind of a flagging system? Do you read when someone has turned it off? Can you see that? Mm-hmm. So you know immediately if someone has turned it off. Why would they do that if they know that they can be?
It doesn't flag on my computer immediately, no. But if they turn it off, for instance, our system is set up in zones. And so they're broke out in zones throughout the city. If a driver turns off the GPS system, which the reason most of them do it is to hold their position in that zone. So they can go somewhere else and get a run and come back and still have their position. So I don't think they're doing it, for anything illegal, besides our rules. So they do it to hold a position, then they can come back and turn it back on. So when we run reports and look over them, I can tell on the report, this driver on this day at this time turned his off and left. So I have all the reports that I can prove that,
And what do you do?
We have a disciplinary board at Checker Cab. So if I catch that that's happened, they have to come and meet the board and explain their actions. And whether it's first offense or second offense, then discipline is handed out. And I do fire drivers for doing that, because it's not just for my customers, it's for them also. So they, a lot of drivers don't like me because of that, but we do have discipline at Checker Cab.
Mr. Fields, has your office prepared a proposed rule and wording for the commission to consider?
We did not prepare a specific worded rule, mostly because what I'm hoping is that the commission would pass the requirement, very much like if you were, for instance, to read the ordinance, it requires top lights. What I'm hoping is that you would require every cab in the city to be equipped with GPS tracking. And then we would establish
the minimums.
Exactly, that it would be left back to staff to do the implementation and deal with that. Because again, one of the things that we'd like is the ability to do a report within 24 hours. And when I met with all the companies on Monday afternoon and with the representatives of all the companies, and we had a long discussion about it. And there was never any debate among the companies that they thought it was important. Their issues were how quickly can we get it installed. We want to do some testing and some of that, but there was never a question about the rest of it. The reason I didn't give you specific is there are a myriad of different ways to do this, and as long as they can create reporting and reports, for instance, Checker sent over, Taxi USA and others have sent over, this is what my report would look like if I wanted to see a certain cab on a certain day. And basically it's a report that's going to show the global positioning of the cabs at specific times. So I think, unless legal tells me it's not, I believe that if you were just to enable the staff, pass a rule that requires GPS tracking on all of the vehicles, at that point we would treat, you don't say specific top lights, for instance, or a specific meter, for instance. It'd then be incumbent on the staff to make sure that whatever is installed meets the requirements and the spirit of what the commission has required.
Thank you.
Well, I was just going to add to that, because we were just looking at the top light required section of the code, which says it shall be the duty of the driver to activate such top light at the beginning of each trip and to deactivate such top light at the termination of each trip. Like, if you wanted to add language equivalent to that to the GPS requirement, you probably could do that as well. That way it would give staff something specific to perceive a violation of, in addition to just the requirement of having the GPS tracking system to begin with.
Because clearly in the top light, as you would interpret the top light rule, it's pretty straightforward. When they're in service, the top light at the appropriate time is supposed to be on. The same thing with the meter. That's also in the ordinance. We'd require the GPS, and I have spoken a little with some of the companies about tying the top light back to the meter as it was years ago. I don't think that can be done without any particular action from the commission, or it's just a matter of, as part of the inspection, we will require that if the commission wants that required.
I understand from some of the discussion here that New Orleans and Chicago have this law. I was wondering if anyone has spoken to them to find out what, if any, cab companies had to close as a result of it, or what their language is like, what their language specifying that.
The language is all around. If you were to go to, for instance, the New York Transportation Commission, which is the largest in the country, they have pages of requirements, and they also call for very specific kinds of equipment, within 2 or 3 or 4 different pieces of my memory. They also have 27,000 cabs, and they're highly regulated, and they don't give a lot of options to their companies. Beyond that, again, the language that I found was generally will be required GPS. I can certainly go back and look, but some cities don't require GPS at all. We just think it's important. And
Well, I'm at the cities that do require it, so that we could perhaps, if we read what they require and if it works for them.
If you can, if the commission were to pass the rule, certainly the staff could go through and put together those kind of minimums and requirements and go back to the companies. I don't think we're going to have any problem with the companies agreeing to go forward with this.
How long do you think it'll take to installed?
Some companies are up and running now. Obviously, there's not an issue. Others, when we met on Monday, that was one of the issues that came up, and they may want to speak to that directly. Some were, I was looking at maybe 60 to 90 days. Some of the companies said, we can probably get it installed in 60 to 90 days, but the issue may be make sure all the bugs are out, and we're not sure we could do that again. They could address that better than me because they're all, either they have it or they're all looking at it right now. So you may want to hear from them in terms of what they think from a time standpoint.
There's a question I had. If a driver did turn off their GPS, right now the companies would handle it discipline-wise. Should we bring them in front of the commission?
If the top line, if the GPS is required in the piece of equipment, if they turn it off, that would be a violation of the rules because it has to be in and it has to be operational. If the company reported it to us, because now we're going to be very much like you've required random drug testing. When this happens, at least in the beginning, we're certainly going to be asking for various companies pick a number and bring it in. And we're the one thing we do want on the rule is very strict within 24 hours of the call. I think we can enforce, and I think we can if the company will report, we can certainly bring them in front of the commission.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on this issue of a potential global positioning system tracking requirement? With that, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of our consideration of a GPS tracking requirement for taxi cabs.
Mr. Chairman. Ms. Costonis suggested that if we want to be able to deal with the drivers individually, that we want to make sure in any rule that should pass that not only is it required to be on and operational, that it can't be turned off, that if it's turned off, it's a violation.
Yeah, I mean, if you make that a part of your rules such that it's a violation of, either the regulations or, council adopts it of the ordinance, then at that point it would become something that you all would have enforcement over, as well as the individual companies, of course, having the ability to discipline the drivers they employ.
I also think we should take it a step further, that if the company does not bring it before the commission, then the company is in violation.
You can make it both. It depends how the rule is worded.
To incentivize the company to bring it before the commission.
Commissioners, are there any motions?
We're asking for a motion, right?
Yes, and it looks like
Are you writing one?
Mr.
Well, go ahead.
Turner
You're
is
better at
trying to
it.
formulate one.
I think about 4 of us were writing one.
I'll take a stab at this, and I would make a motion that we adopt a rule that requires cabs to have global positioning systems, that each global positioning system known as a GPS shall be activated when the taxi cab is in service and turned off when the taxi cab is not in service. That if the GPS is not activated when the cab is in service, that would be a violation on the driver, or a driver violation. Further, that when a company becomes aware of a driver violation, the company has 24 hours to report it to Mr. Fields' office, whatever that may be specific, the commission.
Commission staff.
So then we'll bring it to the commission.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's been a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We're moving on now to the next item on our agenda, having to do with renewing record driver permit requests. Mr. Fields.
We have 4 people present for renewing. These are drivers that have had permits in the past and would like to renew. Jeremy L. Clemens, William J. Davis, Mark J. Palmer, and Jeffrey W. Winchester.
I make a motion that we renew their permits.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Next item is our new record company license. It's one new record company license request by Connect One Recovery LLC. Mr. Fields?
The company is a new company. It's been, the application has been reviewed by the staff, and we recommend approval.
I make a motion that we approve the license of Connect One Recovery LLC.
I'll second.
All those in favor of renewing the license, or excuse me, issuing the license?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have new record driver permit requests by several individuals. Mr. Fields?
There's been a little bit of a change since the last update I sent you, but I'll explain. There are several. We had originally wanted to ask 3 to be pulled out for separate approval. 2 of them, Mr. Pagan and Mr. Price, have asked to. They're not present. Mr. Vardell is present, and we will address that in just a moment. So what I'd like, if staff would recommend that Vincent M. Antolino, Stephanie A. Benefield, Courtney M. Brown, Richard E. Kerrigan, Charles W. Cowles, Christopher G. Easley, Kyle D. Forbes, Marlo J. Martin, Anthony J. Novell, and Charles D. Shaver be granted record driver permits.
Commissioners, is there a motion with regard to those individual driver permit requests?
Move approval.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Fields, that leaves Mr. Pagan, Mr. Price, and Mr. Vardell.
Mr. Pagan and Mr. Price have indicated they would not be present. I'd ask that you deny them based on their non-appearance.
I move to deny Mr. Pagan and Mr. Price.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. For Mr. Fields, that leaves Mr. Vardell.
Mr. Vardell is present.
And Mr. Fields, I know initially you indicated that Mr. Vardell was withdrawing his request.
Well, we did not think he was going to be present. The issue that's brought him here typically, well, when we bring a person in front of you, we know which company they're going to operate with, we're going to work for. We learned from Mr. Vardell that he would not be working for New Hope Towing and Recovery, so we did not have a company. I'm hoping he's got a company today, or he can explain how he will be able to have a company prior to, if you were to give him a permit.
Thank you, Mr. Vardell.
Yes, I was working for New Hope Towing, and I have since resigned that position, and I have not found another company that I want to work for just yet, but I was hoping to go ahead and get my permit so that I already had that out of the way.
Any questions from the commission?
Mr. Fields, were there any issues with the application?
No, sir, not until we found out that he didn't have a company. If you do have the application in your packet. He had some had issues, some tickets and such several years back, but from an approval standpoint, had this not happened, we would have asked you to approve.
Okay.
But again, when it changed, the application changed, it was already in your possession, so we felt like it needed to be in front of you.
What's the disposition on the arrest for domestic assault?
Do what, sir?
What happened to the case on domestic assault?
As far as I know of, it was totally dropped. All that's been taken care of.
Mr. Fields, there's no reason not to approve other than so there's not. Okay.
No, the only thing I would ask, if you approve it, require Mr. Vardell to report immediately to which company he'd be working for.
So the commission could approve, subject to him being employed with the company?
There's not a specific requirement that in the ordinance that I'm aware of that says he has to report the company. However, by practice, the commissioners want to know where they were working. Again, this is a little special situation because we just found this out yesterday or the day before, I think. So there's nothing in his history that would indicate there'd be a problem. We just would work with him to know exactly where he's working. And there's certainly enough record companies in town where jobs are available.
Ms. Vardell, I have one other question. When did you resign from your previous employer?
It was last Friday.
Last Friday.
Yes.
What was the reason?
Just differences of opinion. I was expected to work and work a 40-hour work week and be on call the rest of the time, and I was tired of never having any free time, basically.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd move approval with the stipulation that Mr. Vardell report to the staff his employment status when that changes.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Next on the agenda, we have a new driver application for an other passenger for hire vehicle by Mr. Donovan Valentine. Mr. Fields.
Mr. Valentine had a permit to drive a passenger vehicle for hire issued several years ago. However, on October the 23rd of 2011, he appeared in front of the commission, and you took disciplinary action against him for operating a vehicle for hire without a certificate of public convenience and necessity. In other words, his driver's permit was legal, but he was operating a company without the appropriate authority, so you revoked his permit. Anytime a permit is revoked, staff brings anyone, regardless of the time limit, back to the commission for consideration. There's nothing in it, from a record standpoint, there's the only issue that we would raise that he did operate the company without permission, but that can certainly be remedied by an application process.
And that was how many years ago?
It was in October of 2011.
I see no reason why not to issue this permit.
Do you have anything you want to share?
Unless you have any questions.
One thing I might ask, if I may, is you intend to reopen, to try to open Monarch Transportation back?
I guess that is something I did want to share once you had decided what you were going to do. I did want to go ahead and do that with whatever paperwork was required. I didn't turn that in when I turned in for the application to drive because, of course, I didn't know exactly what was taken away and what wasn't. So yes, I would like to do that as well.
If you did receive your license to drive, would you go work for another company right now, or are you going to directly try to open Monarch?
Both. I have a company that I'd work for, and I would turn around and open up Monarch Transporters as well.
Okay, what company will you be
Eagle
working
Limousine.
for? Which one?
Eagle.
Eagle.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioners, is there a motion with respect to Mr. Valentine's application?
Well, I would like to make a motion that we do give him issue the permit, but I'd like him to report back to the commission or to begin the paperwork process immediately on opening up this company. What we don't want to see is you out there driving again without operating Monarch without the paperwork.
Yeah, actually, I got the paperwork, and I just waited to this time to see what's going on before I turn it in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I'm already ready to roll.
He has visited the staff office and picked up the paperwork and has indicated that he wanted to open the company. I think the issue was if he was going to, he didn't want to open the company unless he knew he could at least drive for himself.
Right. Okay. Well, I make a motion that we approve.
Second.
the permit.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Good luck.
Thanks. Commissioners, is there any other business to address?
I just have a couple of reports and a request. Anytime there are changes in the management and or ownership of taxi cab companies, they need to be reported to staff and then reported to the commission. There are some board changes that I wanted to bring you up to date on. On Green Cab, Eden Hagos has been deleted as one of the partners. Two executive officers, Desbilo Mahari and Giannis Asefe, are no longer officers. Tadessa Essa is now the president of Green Cab, and he's been involved all along, but he's the president of Green Cab. On Volunteer Cab, Tariku G. Burhani is now the chair. Under 10 Cab, two board members have resigned. Hamza Osman and Abdukwana Gadi have resigned as board members. And my understanding of it is I'd need to report them back to you because the application's changed, so we would need to alter the application, need to be reported to you.
Is there a reason why so many people resign from the board?
I don't have good answers. I don't have answers for that. The volunteer taxi was they just had another election, and I know that part. The other two on the 10 Cab, I think again, if you remember, 10 Cab was a company established by multiple drivers, and I think maybe they decided they didn't want to be part of the ownership of the company, so they moved along. As far as the Green Cab, I'm not sure. It's possible that the process, if you remember, that was one of the processes that took several months. I'm assuming just things may have changed over that time period. But it's not required to tell. I wasn't required to ask why as much as I had to report to you. I do have one request. In addition to your public hearing on insurance, and we're going to work very closely with legal to make sure we get it perfectly noticed on all those issues. One of the things that has come to my attention over the last several months continues to be issues around accessible cabs in Nashville. In conversations with a wide range of groups, including Metro Transit Authority, the MTA or bus system, there is a continuing need for additional accessible taxi cabs. In the past, the Commission had taken a one-time opportunity to give companies a chance to bring additional cabs on if they would be accessible. I would like for you to consider holding a special meeting to establish a rule that would allow a company to have 10% of their fleet accessible. It would not count against the cabs that for instance, we issued in January. But if you had a cab company with 80 cabs, you could then have 8 accessible cabs. They could never be shifted over to the 80. In other words, you can't. It's not going to be one of those things where if the 8 have to stay accessible. You're not going to have 88 regular cabs. They're going to be those 8. If you take one off, it becomes 7. If you take 6 off, just 6. But you could always have that as a way to do it. Again, it appears to me that we have a need. I know that's something that the Commission discussed a little bit at the several meetings we had. But I would like to discuss that and bring it to a special meeting. However, if the Commission does not want to have that special meeting at this time, it's clearly up to you. I don't want to bring that meeting unless y'all are ready to talk about it.
When you say special meeting, are you talking about a specially set meeting apart from our regular monthly meeting?
What I would do, I'll let our lawyer tell that.
No, not necessarily. It just means in addition, it can be scheduled at the same time as your regular meeting as far as scheduling is concerned. But because the rule on additional permitting of vehicles says that there's an annual meeting and then there are special meetings on that, and it does have to be, public and all of that, so that it would be, since it is not the annual meeting, it would be a specially called meeting.
So we can do it next month after this meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. Or during, effectively.
The MTA relies on accessible cabs quite often.
Yes.
Yeah. Anytime the Metro Accessible Ride Program does not have capacity, they depend on contracts. while I can't speak for MTA, I suspect that MTA will want to be present at the next meeting to talk about it. I think the mayor's.
The Mayor's Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, I think, may be weighing in on this issue in their meeting in early May as well.
And I also suspect the Center for Independent Living would want to be involved. Again, it's a pretty big issue. We've clearly put on a lot of cabs, and that was one reason I didn't want to bring it as a part of the other process. But it strikes me the special needs cabs that we're talking about are needed with the volume of people that will be coming in. We're not even addressing that. We're just dealing with volume that's already here today.
Right.
So what it would amount to is if you were to approve the rule or at the meeting, it would be about 76 new cabs. It'd be a total of 76 cabs that would be accessible.
A maximum.
A maximum of that. What it would amount to is we wouldn't want to penalize any of the companies that are already that have already done that, but it would allow them to build the capacity, and it would then not bear. It wouldn't be a burden. It would not. Burden's not the right word. It wouldn't be counted against their regular cab allotment. It would have this many as I would say, on the other side of the slate. So if they had 120 cabs, they've got 4 accessible, they would basically be able to have 12. They still have 120 regular cabs, but they could have as many as 12 more, a total of 12 accessibles.
And these are vans, probably?
Most of them would be vans, I suspect.
They're very much needed here in Nashville, very much needed.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.